Welcome to the ProLife Team Podcast. I am Jacob Barr. I'm here with Kirk Walden, and we're going to talk about encouraging stories, God's fingerprints, and something that every clinic should revisit as something that's helpful and something that we could all do, better. Kirk, it is so good to have you here. Would you introduce yourself as if you were talking to a small group of pregnancy clinic directors?
Be happy to, Jake. I'm Kirk Walden. I was an executive director of a center from 91 to 99. There I launched Life Trends, which was a company serving pregnancy centers in terms of envisioning, communication, fundraising, all those things. And Life Trends is now a part of Heartbeat International. I've served there as well. And I've also spoken at events for the last 20 years. So any part of this ministry I've had, I've done something. I've even been a board member. So I've done everything but sweep the floors, and I've done that a lot too, and clean toilets.
Yeah, you seem like the jack of all trades, master of a few.
Master of none. That's right.
So I'm excited to hear. Well, before I go there, I also want to say I remember reading your book, The Wall. Probably was that 8 years ago, 10 years ago that you put that out?
That's really good, man. You've got a great memory. It came out exactly 9 years ago.
Okay.
And so you probably, if you read it, it was probably about 8 years ago.
Yeah, I did read it, and I remember it being impactful, like identifying how we're like the stones, like the living stones of that wall. And I remember, thinking about that quite a bit back then.
I loved writing that.
And so I am interested in hearing what you would say when it comes to the question of what story comes to mind when you think about God's fingerprints and the pregnancy clinic movement. Which story comes to mind when someone says, "Where have you seen God working in this movement?" What would you say to that?
That's a great question. I've seen him in many places, but I'll tell you what. I think I see him working through the people. This is all about people. This entire ministry is about people. It's over the years, we've grown in so many ways, from little mom and pops to where we now have medical clinics, where many centers are doing prenatal care, fatherhood initiatives, abortion pill reversal, all of those things. And yet at the core, we're about people. And I see God working through broken people. All of us are broken in different ways. We've got stuff, and he uses our stuff to reach people we couldn't otherwise reach, because we can't reach people if they see us as perfect. And if I could see why we're so effective, it's because people who have made decisions years ago that they regret are now using that time, which was so hurtful, and feeding into the lives of people who are hurting and struggling with the same decision that they went through. And even me, I had a decision, not a decision really to make, but I was a single dad for 9 years, got married to Jennifer, who's just in another room out there with 2 boys. But when that first boy, we found out he was coming, I had 3 kids. I'd been raising them on my own, met Jennifer. And I'll tell you what, I was not happy with the fact that I was going to have another kid. And I'd been telling all these people for years that children are a gift from the Lord. And yet when I got that gift, I was like, I don't know if I want this. God, I don't need another child right now. I am tired. I've got these 3 kids, and you met one of them, Joel, who's now 32. But I had gotten him to age 17. I had another one 15, another one 13. I don't need another baby. And it was really tough. And yet God kind of got my attention. He wasn't angry, but it was like he said, Kirk, when I say children are a gift, do you believe it or do you just say it? Well, over a few days there, I got excited about Josh coming, and he's doing great today, as is the next one, Jake, who is another surprise. And if you want to believe I named him after you, that's great. You go ahead. but I was able to share some of that with people who realized, he's not perfect either. And he's a pro-life guy. And I think it's our people. It's our people who take the brokenness of the past and utilize that. And I'm going to use a term I really shouldn't, but leverage that in a way. God uses that in other people's lives to reach them. And I'm just, if we do that, Jake, we do that, we change the world.
Yeah, I think yeah, it feels like you're touching on the concept of, yeah, helping, inviting people to heal out of our brokenness.
Yeah,
If and I feel like that's where God works, is, and that's where we've been met, is our in our own personal healing experiences with God reaching into our, in, showing up in our needs, and then that's where we can then offer help to others, because we know that God answers that need, and that, can provide the restoration in those areas.
absolutely. And Jesus takes us, and we always say, well, Jesus takes us right where we are. He really does. And I have to understand that and say that is absolute gospel truth. I'm writing a book now called Saving Samaria, and I'm very excited about it. It should come out this summer. But one of the key moments, of course, is when he meets the Samaritan woman, when Jesus meets the Samaritan woman. And here's a woman with 5 husbands in her rearview mirror. She's got struggles. She's living with a guy, and she's not part of the social scene in Sychar or anything like that. She is a mess. And yet Jesus sees incredible qualities in her. He sees a little, I go through it in the book. I could do it here, but it's going to take a while, so I'm not going to do that. But he sees moxie in her. He sees honesty in her, which he compliments 2 times. And he sees a willingness to stand up against people and stand strong in the face of any opposition, all in that one encounter. And he chooses her to be the very first person to take the good news into Samaria. And after that, we see some other things happen. We see the story of the Good Samaritan, all of that. But you look in the book of Acts, and Samaria becomes a key launching point of the church. And I think, wait a minute, Samaria is the place where Jews don't go. They don't speak to them, where good Jews don't go. And they are totally separated from the rest of their Jewish brothers and sisters, until Jesus takes the last person I would think of with all this mess in her past to change everything.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we do in the life affirming community. He takes many of us who have struggled with different things, tough decisions, bad mistakes, and says, you're exactly who I need to reach that young lady and that young man who come in the door. And if you want to find God's fingerprints, that's where it is, because he takes us even with our messes and says, you're exactly who I need. Come on, let's do this. And I
Yeah.
love it.
And when I hear that story, one of the exercises that one of my pastors at my church will often have us do is, put yourself in the shoes of the person who Jesus is interacting with, and imagine being there as an observer, or imagine being the woman at the well with 5 relationships, and she's living with someone else at the time, and just imagine, what it's like to be in that person's shoes. And I think Jesus meets each one of us with all of our baggage, and with all of our shortcomings and sin and facades. He sees right through our facades.
Yeah.
And he definitely saw through her facade, because he was able to read her for where she was, and with just amazing insight and just knowledge. And so that's a really, and also the Good Samaritan, that's so I never really thought about it, but the woman at the well was the precursor to the Good Samaritan story, I suppose. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
There are 6 Samaritan encounters in there that Jesus has, and they're all fascinating. But that's why I had to write a whole stinking book about it. I couldn't just stop.
Yeah.
We could talk about it on the podcast, but just the things that he was willing to do. Like another time, they challenged him. They said, "You have a demon. No, you're a Samaritan and have a demon." And Jesus could have easily said, "No, I'm not a Samaritan." He didn't do that. When they threw that label at him, he did not dismiss it, and he did not accept it. He just didn't even talk about it. He says, "I don't have a demon." And then he talked about why he does his father's will. He says, your father is the devil, when he's talking to these Pharisees and stuff. But they threw this Samaritan label at him, And he was willing to just let that go and not even address it, because he knew that if he said, I'm not a Samaritan, he would alienate the Samaritan people. But if he said, he couldn't say, I am a Samaritan, wouldn't be true. But he was so wise not to take on labels. And I think that's another thing that we do well is, and I challenge us, I don't want us to say we're not pro-life. I'm not going to say that at all. But I think we take on that pro-life label really quickly, and people look at us and go, oh, okay, you're one of those. And I'm using the word life affirming a lot more these days.
Yeah.
And I talk about the life affirming community, and I'm not afraid to say pro-life. There's some people saying, well, we're not pro-life. And I go, well, I kind of am. If you pin me against the wall, I am. But I tell people, if they say, well, are you pro-life? I say, I don't know about labels, but all I know is that when a young woman and young man are facing an unexpected pregnancy, a lot of us look at that and say, that's their problem. And I say, no, my faith tells me that's my concern too. And I need to reach out and offer her the hope and the help, because she deserves that hope and help, and her child deserves that hope and help. And so I think that is a way of conveying who we are without just throwing a label and a bumper sticker out there.
Yeah. I would say, I would reflect that in the story of the Good Samaritan, I've been the robber, and when it comes to
Ooh,
my relationship with my wife, I have done things that have hurt her. And I've also been the person left on the side of the road, bleeding and need of help. And I
yeah,
don't get to pick who's going to help me. And then I've also been the religious person who, is busy with my emails and my calendar and my
me too,
business.
brother.
And I ignore the person that I should be reaching out to help. And so I've taken on all those roles. Most people always say be the Good Samaritan, but in reality, I think all those roles are actually there's a lot of truth in all of those roles, not just the Good Samaritan who is completely rejected but yet stepping in to help at the right time.
Yeah, I tell you, it's not as easy as I think. I had an easy opportunity today. Me and my wife Jennifer, we're walking down the street. Guy, one of our neighbors up the street, who I've never met. I've met him once. His name's Lewis, and he has got a flat tire on his car. He got it back to his house, got a flat tire. He is fumbling and struggling. And we were on a walk, and I was like, we could keep walking. And part of me wanted to just keep walking, but because I didn't want to get dirty hands. I've now washed them, but it wasn't a big deal. It took us 15 lousy minutes. We had him back on the road and all this kind of stuff. But I think it is so easy to pass by people.
Yeah.
Well, I've got something else to do. We're going on a walk. I'm having a time with my wife. This is so important. No, we did it together. She held the tire and I was knocking the bolts off, and we were lifting we were doing all this with Lewis, and it was a great way to meet a neighbor, but it is so
Mm.
easy. I look back and I go, I almost walked by. I almost just kept walking. Said, hey, good luck with that.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see that book come out, because what a interesting area to spend time considering and thinking and seeing how, the woman at the well, I mean, there's so much richness there when it comes to her receiving help from Jesus, and how that reflects the pregnancy clinic love and care that's being poured out.
And we had the Good Samaritan. He was moved by compassion. And what I'm trying to tell people here, or get across, what I'm trying to make, is the only way we win on the life issue is through compassion.
Hmm.
We win people through compassion. And people say, well, no, we got to lay out the truth really hard sometimes. So, well, Jesus had a lot of opportunities to do that with Samaritans and with others. The only people who got the truth were the Pharisees, the ones who were binding people with heavy burdens and all of these things. We win people, and we win on issues through compassion. And I walk through that a little bit more, because I talk about how the early Christians, exposure in Roman times was very popular, and popular, I shouldn't say it that way. When if they didn't want a child, they'd take the child out to the riverbank, leave it on the riverbank to die. Well, the early Christians went out and got the children and brought them in, as Andy Stanley calls it, the early foster movement, the early Christian
Mm.
foster movement. And over time, people began to take notice of their compassion, and what was accepted practice became unacceptable. And then under Constantine, it became illegal. And under Valentinian later on, in the later 300s, I think 374, it became a capital crime to expose your child. And it was all because the Christians showed compassion.
Hmm.
They changed the culture without the right to vote, without the right to redress their grievances or anything like that. They changed the culture. In modern day, and I know I'm getting this off track, sorry, but I'm just going to talk.
Oh no, it's good.
But in modern day times, if we can call it modern day, we all know Jackie Robinson of the Brooklyn Dodgers, first African American to play baseball. Why did that happen? It happened because Branch Rickey, who is the president of the Dodgers, 42 years before he signed Jackie Robinson, 42 years earlier, he was a baseball coach at Ohio Wesleyan. He had a guy on his team named Charles Thomas, who was African American. And in Ohio, it wasn't a big deal. Well, he took him on a road trip with the rest of the team to Notre Dame. And in South Bend, the hotel operator said, he can't stay in this hotel. And Ricky in 1903 was stunned. I
Hmm.
can't believe this. And he talked the innkeeper into allowing Charles Thomas to stay in his room. And while he was in there, Charles Thomas was rubbing his arms and he said, if I could just get this skin off, if I could just change the color of my skin, it'd all be okay. And he was crying. And
Hmm.
Branch Rickey decided right then that when the opportunity came, through compassion, his compassion for his friend Charles Thomas, he knew that when his opportunity arose, he was going to change baseball. And he did. After Jackie Robinson became part of the Dodgers, another couple of years later, 1 year later, Harry Truman desegregated the military for the first time. Once they had seen Jackie Robinson play, all of a sudden we see the president saying, you know what, whites and blacks could fight alongside each other. And then after that, we had Brown versus Board of Education. And after that, we had Rosa Parks. And after that, we had Martin Luther King. A case can be made here that Branch Rickey's compassion changed America on the race issue. He at least sped the process along. And I think if we do the same thing with the life issue, I think we can turn the tables where even if Roe is overturned, we're still a 50-50 country.
Yeah.
I think we can take it from 50-50 to 90-10, but it's going to be through compassion. It's through
Yeah.
pregnancy centers. And we've just got to take our game to the next level. And the people I'm talking to right now are already doing that. But we've got to get more people on board. And that's why I wrote the book. So we just need to pull more people in to the compassion, because everybody's watching the elections, which are important. Everybody's watching the court, which is important. But the highest priority is compassion. And if compassion drives us to build these pregnancy centers, and if compassion drives our politics, and compassion drives us in the judicial realm, if it's all about compassion, I think we win the day.
Yeah. And I think compassion can be offered to one person at a time,
Yes,
and it can become something that all of us can offer to one person at a time,
exactly.
or as small groups and large groups. But yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and there's a lot of correlation between, the racism and the way that the unborn have been treated, and dehumanizing a people group in a way that is terrible and
Yes.
dangerous.
And I tell you though, getting back to pregnancy centers and race, people sometimes I'll be in different parts of the country and they'll say, well, is there a lot of racism in the South and that sort of thing? Is that a real struggle? And I smile and I say, the pregnancy center banquet that I went to that was the most integrated that I've ever been to in my life. It was like 40-60-60-40, something like that. I said, guess where that was? And they go, where? I said, Selma, Alabama. And I think of all places where the civil rights movement, the walk across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, which they just celebrated a few days back. And here it was, Selma. We've integrated the pregnancy center movement in such a way that a town that was known for its racism is now one of the most integrated, and it's shown at their pregnancy center event. And I was talking to a Black pastor there at that event, and he said, yeah, this guy on the board over there who happened to be white, he pointed him out and said, that doctor over there, he tells me where we're going on a mission trip. We all go together. And I think, yeah, we're getting there. And I think a lot of you talk about race. Look, we'll take any color comes into the pregnancy center, and we work together in all colors. And I think we're seeing that really take off, and it's fun to see.
Oh, that's good. So Kirk, where would you, switching into a new area, where would you say pregnancy clinics need? Well, what's an idea that you've come across that's relatively new? Let's say it has a minority of clinics are currently using it, but it seems like a good idea that would be good to promote. That is still just a minority. Maybe 20% of clinics or something, some small amount currently do it, but yet it's something that should be shared and talked about.
Here's the thing, and I'm going to be, maybe I'm wishing and hoping, maybe I'm wrong, and that may be very true, but here's what I'd like to see. A lot of pregnancy centers have fatherhood initiatives. We're talking about it. You go to CareNet, they're talking about fatherhood all the time. Mm-hmm. You go to Heartbeat Conference, there's going to be a fatherhood talk or something going on, and people are doing different things, trying to get this off the ground. I got friends involved in it, and everybody will tell us, we got to do this, right? This is, and so it's in more than 20% of centers. But what I keep seeing is it's just hard to get it to take off. Because we're using volunteers. And here's my challenge: is I just went in the dark on my light here. I don't know what happened, but
it's fine.
People don't need to see me too well anyway. Maybe it's kind of like I'm a CIA undercover operative. But here's the challenge, and I may be dead wrong, but if 86% of women, that's a figure we've heard over the years, who see their child on ultrasound choose life, we're all going to get the ultrasound, right? We're going to get an ultrasound, and we've done that. We've got a nurse manager. We're doing all these things, and we're doing advertising for this. Okay, great. Well, 83% of women who end their pregnancies surveyed later, will say that if the dad had been more involved, they probably would have chosen life. 83%. And I'm saying, okay, are we willing to make the same investment in dads that we're making in ultrasound?
Yeah.
And somebody says, well, to get a fatherhood staffer on board all the time, because we get a part-time person, and hey, that's a great step. Or we do volunteers, and that's a great step. But would we be willing to go the whole thing and say, we're going to get a full-time coordinator, we're going to pay him well so that he doesn't have to do 3 different things to work with us? And that's a huge step of faith. And so I'm not telling anybody they have to. I'm not saying that if you don't, I can't go there, because I'm not on the ground. I'm sitting here in my home, in my little sitting room where I write stuff, and it's easy for me to say. But I'm just asking the question, what would happen if we invested fully in a fatherhood coordinator who then brought in staff members and said, hey, we're going full speed ahead on this? I wonder what the results would be. I wish I could tell you I know. I wish I could be that dogmatic and tell you, Jake, if we do this, this is going to happen. I don't know, because we could pay a father of 3 kids or whatever, 60, 70 grand or whatever it is. I don't know. I'm just throwing out numbers. Is almost as much as our executive director, whatever that number is. And we might not have great results. So I don't know, but it would be interesting if we could try.
I do think we know that a woman in a crisis, if she knows that she has a support system, such as the man in the relationship, then the chances go up dramatically for her to believe that she can continue on and, not think of abortion as her only option. I think that's,
Right.
the support and care that sometimes a volunteer speaks that into her life through care and time and listening, and after building rapport and trust, then delivers some really good direction. But if we can reach her significant other or the person that
Mhm.
she's listening to in her tight circle of her boyfriend, her husband, her friends, I think there's a lot of value in her support system supporting her in in a good decision, and being there to speak life into her decision, or to speak direction and life into her world. um and if the dad would have confidence and excitement in becoming a dad, or the
Yeah.
father becoming a dad, that's going to provide her with a lot of support. um One of the men's programs I heard about is they would have they had a men's program that would involve woodworking, and they would build a crib, and then and it would allow the guy to do something that would make sense to him while he was being able to talk, maybe in a discipleship
Fascinating.
type of woodworking room with someone else, and then but then actually to build something that it felt like he was doing something to contribute, which has a lot of value for him. Whereas normally he might feel like he's lost in a pink building and
Yeah.
not sure how to navigate the feminine world of some pregnancy clinics. It feels very feminine.
Yes.
And so yeah, having a way to helping the guy navigate it, helping giving him an option to like get involved and to contribute, and to feel like, and then for him to make something out of wood that could then become like a family heirloom. It just went from him feeling awkward to now he feels like he's taking some ownership, and he's got some buy-in from like his splinters and woodworking work. And
I
so
love it. That's fascinating.
but yeah, I think in the end we got to find out. There's lots of ideas that would allow find more ideas for that are representing him feeling included and needed more so than a third wheel of some sort.
I like it. And one of the things I challenge setters on is we keep all these statistics, decisions for life, faith decisions, all these things. And one I would love to see us put into our statistics is how many two-parent families have we seen come out of our ministry,
Hmm.
either through adoption or through bringing the father in,
Yeah.
or building a shaky relationship and rebuilding that. How many two-parent families? Because that's one of the things that we would love to see. Obviously, single moms are courageous, and I want to give them everything, all the accolades I can. But I think most single parents, and I was a single parent for 9 years, most single parents would say, I sure could use somebody else. So uh, with all of our support of single moms, and I think that's great. When I was a single dad for 9 years after my wife left and before I met Jennifer, um, I was just, can I have somebody else, And those 9 years were a long 9 years. So I know what a little bit of a single mom of what she goes through being a single
Yeah.
dad. And yeah, let's count two-parent families in our statistics. And if the number's 2 or 3 one year, that's okay. Let's just try to raise it to 7 or 8 or 9 or 10. But the more we can be proactive about it and intentional any way we can, I think the better off we are.
Yeah. There's a few subtopics that sort of branch off of this one. One would be, if let's say if one person's a believer and one person's not a believer, I think the priority would be that the person who doesn't know Jesus yet meets Jesus before promoting marriage as being maybe the right, idea to pray about. Um, Generally, I think that's true, but then again, every situation might require its own set of creative
Yeah.
thinking.
Every situation is different. I mean, there is a principle there about
Yeah,
unequally yoked and all those things. Although here's the one we can go back and forth on.
sure.
Are, once they've conceived a baby, are they already yoked anyway?
That
I don't know. I mean,
that is a
in a way,
yoke.
are they?
Yeah, I think the unequally yoked is, yeah, they've already got a lifelong connection at that
Yeah.
point.
Now, obviously, I think here's the easy one. If the two had a, one moment or something like that, and they are not at all together, then I understand. We don't need to just have shotguns and get people married. I mean, that's not,
Yeah, but it's an
no wisdom in
interesting
that.
thought of if someone's already yoked. The whole idea of not being unequally yoked is maybe that's a decision that's already been, yeah,
Yes,
passed. That's an
and
interesting thought.
that tells us that there is no easy answer here. And I can't sit here on a
Yeah,
podcast and tell somebody this is what you do in this situation, this is what you do in that situation. But a lot of times, what we're seeing more than anything is we've got a couple that's already together. They've been together for a long time and
yeah,
they've got a baby. And it's like, hey, you may as well. You're already basically living a married life. Why don't we go ahead and support that as a real marriage and make a real marriage here and go from there?
yeah.
Uh, but again, there's no cut and dried answer here, and but it makes for
Hmm.
fascinating discussions, that's for sure.
Yeah, and then the other subtopic that, and I don't know how to navigate this one very well, but when someone doesn't choose to get married, but yet they both decide to parent in some kind of
Mhm.
capacity. So it's almost like, I'm not sure what that's even called. Is that like a
Co-parenting, something along.
co-parenting? Okay. And I don't know much about co-parenting, but it feels like that's one of the options that is sort
It
of.
is.
Can you speak to co-parenting? Like, what are your thoughts on that as a one of the options that's on the table?
Yeah, it is an option on the table, and I think it can be awkward, but it can be done. And the point here, I think that we're really talking about the foundational aspect here is we want a father to be part of the equation with the child,
Yeah.
and instead of her being on her own. And if he can come in and be part of the child's life, if marriage isn't in the cards for whatever reason, okay. But if he can be part of the child's life, then I think that's great. And then it takes a lot of maturity because when another man comes into her life, how does all this work? So
Yeah.
again, we have a our society is messy, and I wish I could clean it all up and say do this and do that and do this, and it's just not that easy. But
Yeah.
I know dads are good when they're good dads.
So
That
so
much
one
I
of
know.
there's a clinic in Tucson, where I'm at, and one of the things that they've done, I think they've done it 9 times over the last maybe 7 years, is that they have paid for the justice of the peace. They found a church to put on the wedding.
Oh,
They
great.
found someone to make a cake. They found someone to bring some
Cool.
flowers, and they put on the wedding for a couple. And for most of these couples, they couldn't afford the wedding, and so it was the very first one. I remember Kathy was saying, yeah, she couldn't afford to go to the justice of the peace and pay $50 to get married, and so that, essentially she started like feeling the burden of that, financial
Yeah.
strain, and said, we'll cover it. And then they ended up, yeah, doing a lot more than just a $50 license fee. And
Isn't
just,
that terrific?
and so that's a really fun idea that ties in with the men's program in a way.
Yeah.
And for certain situations where, yeah, finances are tight and there's a couple that wants to get married but doesn't see how to get there because of, weddings are expensive and they can be very overwhelming when it comes to the financial side of a wedding, but they can also be done with some help and
Yeah.
without being expensive.
Well, all goes back to what does compassion look like in this situation? And to throw that couple a party and say, we're with you and we're behind you is tremendously compassionate. And it takes a few dollars out of our wallet. I get it. But it goes back to the Good Samaritan
Yeah.
who, when he came across this person hurting on the side of the road, he ended up giving the innkeeper 2 days' wages to take care of this guy.
Yeah.
And he didn't give him his entire wallet. He didn't say, I'll take care of him forever. But he said, hey, if he uses up that money, then when I come back through, I'll pay you for that. And I think that's what we do.
Yeah.
Just a little compassion can go a long ways in giving people that start. is a really exciting thing. And as we could go on all night talking about, a lot of the dads we have in these centers have never known a dad, and they're learning for the first time what this is all about. And
Yeah.
it is tough. I had a moment with a young man in my office when I was a director, and I asked him, "What are you going to do if she's pregnant?" And he shrugged his shoulders and he said, "I don't know, whatever she wants to do."
Hmm.
And my first thought was, wow, this is a deadbeat dad. He needs to step up. Now, I didn't say that. I wasn't, but I was thinking all those things in my mind. I talked to him a little bit, and I think I was kind, but on the inside, I was seething at this guy. Why don't you step up? But when I had a little time to step back and think about it, I thought, and this was in the early 90s, I thought, for 20 years, this guy has been told he has no choice in this matter. All he can do is write a check. She gets to choose. He has to shut up. He was telling me what he thought I was supposed to hear.
Yeah.
Thought he was saying the right thing. So I'm understanding. I began to understand these guys who haven't had a dad. I had a dad, went to my ball games and did all these things, and uh, and these guys have never known a dad except come by every once in a while and maybe want some money from their mom.
Yeah.
And they're supposed to know what a dad is. We got to help them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good, yeah. So essentially a men's program that provides an opportunity for mentoring and support, so that
Yeah,
men can find out what it takes to be a man in these situations, and having that kind of community
yeah,
support is desired and needed, or needed and desired.
yeah. But
Yeah.
we can do that. And just come alongside them and say, "Hey, man, I've screwed up as a dad a bunch, but I'll tell you at least I'll tell you where I screwed up, and then
Yeah.
we can work together on getting you wherever you need to go." Because I think the best mentor is a guy who's willing to be transparent and vulnerable and say, "You know what? I messed up with my kids. I've not been the perfect dad all the time." And Jen, my wife, has to tell me that I'm a good dad a lot of times because I feel like I fall short more than I get it right. So,
Yeah.
um,
When one of my colleagues at work today was saying he wanted to email one of our clients and saying something, you know, essentially I sent something wrong, and he's like, "Oh, I don't want to send the right thing and just call you out. I'm making a mistake." And I told him, just just send the right thing and say, "This is what Jake should have sent you." So, and I'm like, yeah, I told him, all leaders make mistakes, and good leaders will tell stories about their mistakes.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
I think some of the best leaders that I've ever experienced are ones that show vulnerability and authenticity by sharing where they have fallen short.
yeah,
Because just like we started in the beginning, you can offer healing from your brokenness, and where Christ has provided healing, you can speak to, where I've got this big crack, and yet, yeah, here it is, I'm able to still offer out of that.
yeah. And we don't have to barf all of our problems all over everybody, but there are
No.
times with wisdom and with timing and all those things when it's just the perfect thing to do. And I know a lot of times when I speak at events, I'll tell the story of not being excited about this unexpected pregnancy and struggling with it because I was 45 at the time. And I'm like, I don't need to do this because here I am, I'm 59, my hair is gray, and I've got a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old. But, and I had to play a father son basketball game a couple of weeks ago. It was hilarious, Jake, because I had to play two games. I had to play the middle school and junior high game. And I was like, I can do this. The quarters were only like 6 minutes. And
Okay.
they said, "Oh, we got enough, Dad. So you just play the second and fourth quarters of each game." I thought, this is not a problem. By the time I got to the fourth quarter of that second game, I was winded. I could barely breathe. I was running, and it was like, I ain't going to shoot the ball because the ball is not going to go anywhere near the goal. I will just pass. But I don't know where that was going, but I'm an old guy, and so when I tell that story at events, I inevitably have somebody come up to me and say, "Thank you," because we go to church, we've been Christians forever, and we're in this great church. And I didn't want to tell anybody I wasn't excited about this pregnancy. I couldn't. But thank you. You've given me the courage to say it was tough. I had the baby's great, but I wasn't happy. I get it, and we have to be honest about that.
So so tell me, what is your day-to-day look like at Heartbeat International? Like what is the Kirk Walden schedule look like? Like what do you find yourself doing as you're working with, well, this large group of pregnancy clinics with a variety of needs? How do you fit into that puzzle?
Well, interesting thing, I actually went off of paid staff at the end of May last year.
Okay.
Yeah, to write this book and do some other things. So I am a volunteer staff member with
Oh,
Heartbeat, and in fact,
okay.
I'll at the conference I'm the MC and that kind of thing. But so it's a lot of fun. But what I do day to day is I write, and the other thing, get ready for events. But I field questions all the time from friends I've made over the years. And in fact, if somebody wants to email me and has a question, kirk@kirkwalden.com, just do that and holler at me, because that's what I do. And I do that. That's just part of the joy of doing what I get to do. It's not something where I'm on some paid staff somewhere, but I get to do, like I get to do this podcast, and I'll do about a podcast every month or something like that. And I'll do a Zoom call. Somebody will have some questions. I had somebody today who's leaving her position and was talking about transition to the new director and that kind of thing. What does that look like? And so we go back and forth with questions, and that's what I get to do. And after 30 years in this work, it's kind of nice. I don't feel old. I feel like a kid, but after 30 years in this, I started as a director at 28 and I'm 59 now. I get to tell people of where I kind of fell short or what I learned through this. And I find I have answers that I didn't have 20 years ago. And if somebody has a question, I don't always have the right answer, but I've been through enough wars and stuff to be able to jump in there when somebody has a question. So I love doing
Yeah.
that.
And that is so treasured when to have someone with advice when you're, essentially to help someone fast track, well, hopefully to avoid pitfalls, and as
Yeah.
they're trying to work down their learning curve quicker than maybe you or I did, to be able to
Mhm.
share, what to try first before, and what to skip possibly, because it may not work as you might
Yeah.
expect.
Well,
Possibly.
what's a hack in this situation or whatever? And I still talk to a lot of people about fundraising events and that kind of thing, since I've trained on them. I've trained people in events for years, and the only difference is I'm not an official trainer for anybody, but I can look at different ways people do events and say this works really well, and this group over here has some ideas that you may want to look at. So that's a lot of fun, and I think I'll do some coaching here in the future as well.
Awesome. Well, the last question I have for you, Kirk, is if you could think of a story that would be encouraging to, let's say it's an executive director, she's in her first 4 years of being that executive
Oh boy.
director. How would you, what story of encouragement would you share with someone who is feeling overwhelmed by, by her new role? What would you say to someone in that scenario?
Well, you kind of asking two good questions there. One of them is, what would I say to her?
Okay.
And the question is, and the answer to that is, you don't have to know it all. It's okay if you make mistakes. Draw on other people when you need to. Don't be afraid to ask dumb questions, because this is weird. What we do is weird. It's different than any other ministry in so many ways. There's so much warfare going on, and so many different
Yeah.
challenges that we face. It's not only spiritual in people who, when we think about evangelism, but we're also thinking about human lives are hanging in the balance. And we have got to reach that point where we say, okay, God, I'm going to do what you have called me to do, best I know how to do it. And we always say, leave the results in God's hands. And that's really important, that
Hmm.
we've got to let go of that. But the other thing is, I think there's just a story that came to mind. that you need to know that whatever you do, you'll be shocked at the legacy you're leaving. That pleasantly surprised, I should say. I was in Walmart, which I have to admit, I have shopped at Walmart on many occasions. But I was in Walmart one time, a few years after I was a director, and I was still living in the same city. I was working with a school, helping them with fundraising and starting my own company, Life Trends, for pregnancy centers. But I was working in school during the day. I go into Walmart, I'm getting batteries or something like that. And this girl behind the counter says, "Where do you work?" And I said, well, I work at this school. She said, "No, not there. Not there. No, I don't know you from there. Where'd you work before that?" And I told her, "Well, we've got a line of people at Walmart here, and I'm like third in line, and she's looking at me, and I'm going, okay, what do I say here? Well, I worked at this, Women's Hope Medical Clinic," and she goes, "That's you. You helped me have my baby. You helped me," and she showed me the picture and all this kind of stuff, and I go, okay, whew, But the first people looked at me when she said, "You helped me have my baby," is like, okay, who is this guy? But she was happy, and she wanted to show me her baby, and he was doing fine and all those things. And you don't just hang in there, because there will be a legacy that I think a lot of times when we get to the kingdom of God, I could not imagine what we're going to see as people come up to thank us for what we've done. And so on those dark days, remember there's a legacy that you can't see yet. You just can't see it yet. And I'll close with this. I was in California at an event, and they told me this is going to be a powerful client story. And okay, great. I've heard a lot of client stories. A lot of them are powerful. Some of them you don't know, but we'll see. This lady gets up. She says, "This is the 30th anniversary of this center." And she stands up and she says, "I was the first client that walked in the door." And I'm like, wow, their 30th anniversary, they got their first client that walked in the door. And she said, "I didn't want to have the baby, but I began to talk to so-and-so. And as I did, I began to feel a peace." And she went on through this story. And as she begins to finish, this young man stands up in marine dress blues. And he stands up and he begins walking toward the podium, and he's about 30 years old. And boy, it connects really fast. What's going
Wow.
on here? And he walks up on that stage and he hugs his mama, and he says, "I want to thank you, Mom, for making this courageous choice." He says, "I've had the honor of serving my country in Iraq and Afghanistan and all these different places around the world." And he says, I'm completing my degree at the University of Southern California. And I think he's going to be like this astrophysicist or something. I'm like, holy cow, could you ever get anything better than this? Your first client ends up being a Marine who's saved countless lives, who is now graduating from a prestigious university in this advanced curriculum somewhere. And he's retiring from the Marines at 29, 30 years old. And I just looked up there and I go, there's a legacy right there. You
Yeah.
want to know what you do. You want to know why we're raising money. You want to know why we get up every morning and we go, this is going to be a hard day. You want to know why we do this is because one day when we get to the kingdom of God, we're going to see that happen over and over and over again.
Hmm.
We're not going to believe it. And I think that's why I do it.
Yeah. When you tell that story, I think of, being in heaven, how I don't know how we're not going to have tears of joy.
Yeah, we're not supposed to have tears, right?
I think that's what, yeah, but I don't quite understand how we can't have tears, because there's going to be such amazing emotions.
It's going to be great.
And so, well, Kirk, I really appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward. I'll see you at the Heartbeat Conference in a few weeks. And
Yeah.
so, awesome. Well, I think, I'm excited to share this with executive directors so that they can find encouragement and hope, and really just simply a nice thing for them to support them in the work that they're doing.
Well, they do great work, and I love encouraging, and I hope this has been just that.